Hey everyone, welcome back to Armored Brownies. I'm Hayes, and hopefully this video will educate you and inspire you to do something awesome, and also subscribe. Now, this is quite an in-depth video for the mold making for my recent Kindred sculpt. As you can see, we start out with the sculpt having been wrapped in cling film, or cellophane, to keep all the moisture in the couple of days it's been since I finished the sculpt and then moved on to the mold making. Now, this is the most technical mold I have ever made. I spared no expense and no time on this mold. That really translated to the final mold, which came out amazingly. And hopefully you can take a lot from this video and it can arm you to try this yourself. And also, if I do this video as in-depth as possible, for my next couple of sculpts, we can jump straight from the sculpt to the finished article, and I don't need to show you those videos at all. We start off and I'm starting to create the mold walls that will hold the silicone. Because this is going to be a polyurethane mask, i.e. rotocast or slush cast plastic resin, it means we want a flexible mold to go with the solid casting. And as a rule of thumb, when it comes to mold making, you want a solid mold for a flexible object or a flexible mold for a solid object. Hence silicone for this polyurethane. You can see me building the mold walls out of this foam board. Foam board is amazing for this because you can buy in big A3 sheet. I bought a pack of 20 A3 sheets for about £20, delivered, Amazon Prime, yay. And I'm using a hot glue gun to glue it all together. I'm just cutting it out, slowly building it up, making sure the walls are taller than the tallest part of the sculpt, so I can literally drown the sculpt in all of the silicone that I'm going to put on it. And I'm being extra careful to make sure that underneath the walls there are little buttresses to make sure the weight of the silicone that comes will not rip the whole thing apart. Now, waterproofness for this entire thing is very important. So I'm taking some more of my sculpting clay, this is just my standard water-based clay, to go around all of the seams to make sure none of the silicone will be able to leak out. Once that's all together, I hit the whole thing with varnish, I hit the whole thing with mold release. I actually did that a couple of times, but you can also see me touching up a couple of parts of the sculpt that I wasn't happy with, seeing it at this different angle. And as indicated by the reappearance of the cling film, we've left it another day. The reason we leave it another day is so the mold release and the varnish that we put on at the end, which means the foam board won't stick to the silicone and the sculpt will come out of the silicone happily, needs time to degas. As in, all of the volatile chemicals need to release it into the air so they don't interfere with the silicone, because that can inhibit its curing process. And I find leaving it overnight means that there's no chance of any curing inhibition. But of course, because it's still a water-based clay, you have to be careful about it drying out. I'm actually using the cheapest budget silicone I can afford, but as you'll see by the finished article, it doesn't matter. RTV silicone is basically RTV silicone, and either way it comes out perfectly. You can see here I've poured out an entire kilogram worth of silicone into cups. I don't overfill any one cup because I need to mix them thoroughly, and after I've mixed them I set them aside and then mix up the next one so that the first ones have time for all of the bubbles to rise out of them. And I do that for each one as I go through, adding the catalyst, weighing it all out as best I can. When it comes to pouring the silicone on, I pour it from a height which stretches out the silicone that helps pop bubbles as it goes down. And this is just a process that gets repeated a couple of times just to make sure we have wetted all of the area with our first thin layer of silicone. And it is important we capture all of it. You can spot with your eyes if there are any bubbles that start forming. You can use your fingers to pop them and just work them out of the sculpt. And now we come to the part of the casting that actually got the most questions when I was sharing the photos. Here you can see me adding a much darker red colour to this silicone. That is literally the same catalyst as the orange from the other silicone, only it's dyed a different colour because it's from a different company. But since all RTV silicone is basically catalysed by the same chemicals, it doesn't matter. However, it acts differently on this layer because I add a thixotropic agent to it, which means it's a lot thicker, and you can see me slopping it on like cake icing, where it doesn't run down the sides and pour out like thick cream as the silicone before did. And now you can see the actual finished primary mould all done and dusted and walled, and I left that for a good many hours before coming back and ripping the foam board off. Oh, it was so satisfying to do that, you have no idea. But you might think, there's our mold is done now. It isn't. Silicone is flexible, therefore you need to give it a backbone or a mother mould. We just make a quick plaster mother mould for it out of Hessian scrim and plaster. Literally just plaster mixed up, strips of Hessian wetted down in it, and presto or over the whole thing. And I leave the whole setup to dry overnight just to make sure everything is set perfectly and as strong as it can possibly be. And then the magical moment where I pull it off the face in one move. I'm like a magician. I was so happy with this. It just came off, and then all of the original sculpt came out of the mold. First time, I couldn't spot any bubbles. There was no parts where the silicone was uncured, and the mother mold held together perfectly and fit fantastically around the silicone. And that's what you get for taking time over your mold. Now, I just go around cleaning off the flash. In fact, around this point, I use a Dremel to actually clean up the edges of the mother mold so that they're nice to use. I take a sponge and clean out any of the excess from the sculpt that's left inside the mold, just in case. So we get a nice clean first casting from our mold. No rest for the wicked here. We immediately get our polyurethane out. Here you can actually see me marking up the bottles and the bags the bottles are held in with what they are, what part A or B they are, and the date, just so I know how long I've had, because they can go off and it's very easy to lose track when you've got a lot of different chemicals. The chemicals themselves can bleach the labels on them. I've had that happen before. I have many bottles of mystery chemicals. We mix that up on the scales and just rotocast as ever. It's fairly self-explanatory how to rotocast. I've shown you it before with similar chemicals. And now we come to an interesting part. Here, I'm trying to get the mask out of the mold. This is the first time I've ever used this mold, and as much as I have over-engineered the mold, I still don't 100% know the best way to use it. And as you can see here, I broke my first casting. The very first thing to come out, I broke. Apart from the break, I love it. It's come out fantastically, and I have a plan for this mask as well. I am going to use this in a different project with the break. I'll go back to the silicone half of my mold and actually cut some extra release bits in a zigzag pattern so they hold together and won't create a seam in the back of the ears. And then we just go again. Here we are, releasing the first actual unbroken finished mask from our mold. And it's as good as it promised to be from the first one. And I'm so happy with how clean, how neat. All of the attention to detail and the re-going over it in the sculpt really paid off. And then it just gets the cleaning off of the first casting, which is just my Dremel going around cutting off the excess as you've seen me do on a mask before. Here you go. If you haven't, here you go. And there you go, the finished mask! I hope you are as excited about where this is going as I am. If you found this at all useful or interesting, please do be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this with any other Kindred cosplayers or League of Legends cosplayers that you can, and join me next time where I'll be showing you how I'm making her goat feet. Thanks, goodbye.